Hey class, so this week we have two chapters in Creswell. So right now we're going to take time to go over chapter 8, and it's titled Analyzing and Interpreting Qualitative Data. And so if you have the PowerPoint, you can follow along, and we'll start the slideshow. Okay, so there's the learning objectives. So we're going to just go over how to analyze all the data you would collect for your qualitative research study. Um, there are 6 steps when you analyze and interpret the data, and here they are. So first, you prepare and organize the data for analysis. Second, you're going to explore the data through a technique called coding, and you might be familiar with that already if you've already watched that supplementary video. You use codes to develop descriptions and themes, and we kind of hit coding a little bit in chapter 7. And then step 4 is represent the findings through narratives and visuals. Step 5, you make an interpretation of the meaning of the findings, and then the final step is using strategies to validate the accuracy of the findings. So here's a chart for the qualitative process of the data analysis. It's a bottom-up approach. So that is there and for you to review. Now, for the first step, it says, how do you prepare and organize the data? So step 1, organizing the data. So you have to develop a matrix or a table of sources that can be used to organize the material. You organize it by type, so the interviews and documents and etc. So you group them up. And then you can duplicate copies of materials if you need it. This is where you would transcribe the data. So you would record the interview, and then you have to go and type every word that is said during that interview. So that's the transcription part. And then during the organization phase, you can also prepare data by hand, or there are computer programs out there that can do it for you, and we'll go over those. So transcription is when you convert that audio recording to notes, to text, okay? And you have to do it verbatim, word for word. So there's different programs that you could use to do that. They're still not perfect. You would still need to be very careful and make sure that it's word for word transcribed appropriately. Now, it's known, our book tells us that for 1 hour of audio recording, it would take 4 hours to transcribe that. So it is a lengthy process, and it does take time, but that's just part of the process. So, hints for transcribing audio recorded interviews. So during data collection, here's some hints that you could do. Make sure you have a high quality video recording, and the interview's in a quiet setting. So that way you're going to be able to hear that playback really clearly. You're going to want high quality recording device with an external microphone. You can use lapel microphones. You can store them on your computer when you create digital recordings. Make sure you take backup notes in the event that the recording device does not work. And then bring extra batteries in case your device runs out of batteries. So some more hints during the transcription. Create a word processing file from the recorded audio, and you can place the title at the top of the file, so like the name of the interview, the date, where it was, the site, and then create a file in which there are ample margins on both left and right sides of the pages for writing notes. You're going to double space the text file, and before the questions asked by the interviewer, you identify the question number from the interview protocol, question 1, and then comment. So you just organize it. You can put things in bold so they're easy to see. Okay, so all of those things you should be pretty well versed in doing. Okay, so now you're going to analyze by hand or computer. So hand analysis, researchers read the data, mark it by hand, and divide it into parts. You would do this if you prefer not to use a software program, you want to be close to the data, and you also have ample amount of time to do so. Now, computer analysis, they use software and it can store the data, analyze it, it sorts it can make visual representations of the data. But to use the software, you need to have a large database. You need to be trained into how to use it. And then you're going to also still want to pay very close attention to the words and make sure that they're getting transcribed properly. Okay, so now the use of qualitative data analysis software programs, the procedures for using the data analysis software, you're going to organize your file, select a program, import the file into the software, and then you can read on. So pretty self-explanatory. Some basic features of some of the software you could use is they can categorize it for you. It can do memo writing. So these are just some basic things that they can do for you, and then you can learn all about that if that's what you choose to do and choose to use. Here are some programs that are out there, several of them, and you could go and Google those and try to figure out which ones you would prefer to use. Now, on page 243, it starts talking about coding. So how do you explore and code your data? So first, you're going to obtain general sense of the data by performing a preliminary exploratory analysis. So you read through your field notes and your interviews several times to get a sense of what was observed. Then you can write notes in the margins, and you just kind of put your reflections on the data. So coding the data, read through all transcripts. You're going to start with one document, ask what is this person saying, identify text segments, and we went over that a little bit. So you're going to segment it out, like what are the key words that are like the main idea of their statements, and you're going to assign a code. So like 1, 2, or 3 words that describe what is being said. So it's like the main idea of that sentence, of their statement. And then when possible, use participants' actual words, and that's in vivo code. Terms from literature can be used. Practice lean coding, so 10 to 15 codes for 20 pages of a transcript. Okay, so that would kind of be like the ballpark of where you want to be. You don't want to have an abundant amount of codes, because then you're not going to be able to find themes and to get categories and so forth. So to code the data, you want to reduce redundancy. You always go back to the data. Look for new codes. Find supporting quotes, okay? You want to have about 20 to 30 codes. That's more manageable. You can collapse the codes into 5 to 7 themes. And themes are similar codes that are aggregated together to form a major idea in the database. Okay, so it's like the ideas that they are mostly talking about. They are unique or surprising. They have the most evidence to support them. And you can use a description of people, places, or events in this process. And then here's a visual model of the coding process. This is represented on page 244 in your textbook. So if you have many pages of text, you initially read through the data. That's the first thing. Then you move to the right and you have many segments of text. Okay, so now you're breaking it into segments, smaller chunks, and you divide the text into segments for this information. Then about this phase, you have about 40 to 60 codes that have surfaced. So you're going to label those segments of the information with your codes. Then you're going to go even further. Okay, so you're reducing it with each step. Now you're going to want about 20 to 30 codes. They can reduce or overlap. So you're kind of grouping the ones that overlap together, and you're making smaller groups, smaller codes. And then at the end, you should have 5 to 7 themes that have emerged, and you collapse all those codes into those themes, and that you're able to analyze and report the data once you get it to this stage. So here's a an example interview transcript. So you can look at that and kind of get an example of what the components are for that. How do you use codes to build description and themes? Because that's what you're doing. You're coding to get your descriptions and themes so you can report your data, your findings, okay? So describe and develop themes from data by answering research questions and forming in-depth understanding of your central phenomenon. So that's essentially what's going on. Descriptions give detailed renderings of people, places, and events in the setting, and you can ask, like, what is this place like? What is this person like? So you're trying to build themes. There's different types of themes. Here's 4. Ordinary, unexpected, hard to classify, major, and minor. So there's multiple viewpoints on that in the literature out there, and here's another example that you can read. Now, whenever you're layering themes, so they're you're breaking them down, they're overlapping, it's called layering themes. You subsume minor themes within major themes, and you include major themes within broader themes, and it becomes more and more complex. So they're overlapping. So you start with some minor themes, and then we have some major themes, and then they go into broader themes. And they're overlapping, they're interconnected levels of themes. So you want to work upwards toward a broader level of abstraction. So you have your data, your descriptions, your themes, your broad perspectives. So these are just examples of how you would what interrelating themes are. You're connecting themes either chronologically or maybe a sequence of events or some type of theoretical or conceptual model. So how do you represent and report the findings? Okay, well, now you've done all the research, you've coded it, you've found your themes, and now you want to represent it and report your findings in your study. So this is what it's all coming to a head, and this is where you want to be. This is what you're working towards. So you could do some type of table where you can compare the data from groups, from themes together. You can do some type of diagram that would represent their connectiveness. That's very popular. Some researchers like to do drawings, so they'll map out the physical layout of the site. So if you were doing a site study, or some type of demographic tables that would represent the participants or the research site. Okay, so here's a sample comparison table used to represent information in a qualitative study. So that's there for you to read. And so this just goes more into how you could use a table to represent your data. So they have the names, how many years teaching, the gender, level of class instruction, and so forth. So this would be a good visual that you could use to represent your data. That's just an example of a table. Report your findings by using multiple perspectives. You could have metaphors or analogies. You can make sure you're writing in detail. So just some more examples of how you could report that. And they have good examples in your text where you can read more in depth about that. And I recommend that you do that. It's towards the end of the chapter. So forms of a narrative discussion and qualitative research. So a discussion that presents chronologically. An example would be the chronology of a teacher's experiences with her special education coordinator leading to her resignation from the school. Okay, or you could have a discussion of themes. So you discuss about the theme of the in-classroom landscape of a teacher. So this is just some examples of how you could form narrative discussion. So you would just write about it and tell a story. It's a narrative, okay? So we're almost finishing up this chapter. Whenever you want to interpret your findings, you need to make sure that you summarize them and include your personal reflections about the meaning of the data. You compare the findings in the literature perhaps including personal views. So how did your findings compare to other research findings? And you can compare that and write about that. That's very popular. Always you will address the limitations of your study. And then that's something that you could also look at in other research studies, what their limitations were, and then you could make a study to have like an antidote for that. So you could recreate the study in a way that would eliminate their limitation. And so it just keeps the research process going. And you also will make suggestions for future research at the end of your findings section. Okay, so that's another place that researchers can look and say, yeah, that's a good idea. I think I would like to further this research. So, how do you validate the accuracy of your findings? So, you have to have validity with your findings. So, you have to determine the accuracy of your findings. There's something called triangulation. It's also member checking, and then there's also external audit. So just know that that is out there. And that's pretty much Chapter 8, analyzing your data. So it's real important that you know the coding process and how to code, and then how to analyze it, and then how to represent your data. So I hope this helped with y'all's study for Chapter 8. And y'all just let me know if you have any further questions. Alrighty, y'all take care. Bye-bye.